Dean, what's the name of your thing?
Just deanblundell.substack.com. Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Schmidt with the warning, and thrilled to be joined by my friend Dean Blundell up in Toronto, Canada. That's where you are today, Dean?
Yeah, and you're not, which is disconcerting to me because we've got an ALDS coming up, and you're my Jays game friend.
Right.
And you're busy trying to save America with the Save America movement,
Mm-hmm.
which means I don't get my Blue Jays pal to go to any ALDS games, and we're fit to be tied for this playoff run.
I'm gonna be there for the championship series,
Yeah.
and I think they're going. I think the Blue Jays are a great baseball team. You know, you and I have seen a lot of Blue Jays games this year together,
Yeah.
and they're a really good baseball team. Really
Yeah.
good baseball team.
Yeah, incredible baseball team. You know, it's funny because you and I started going to games kind of halfway through the season when they started to turn things around. They swept the Yankees and went to a game with you. You and I were fresh in our resistance friendship, if you will,
Mhm.
and we start going to Jays games. And you said something to me that for an American who understands the game of baseball, loves the game of baseball, understands that this is America's pastime, you said something to me that'll never, ever leave me. You said, I don't know if you remember, the Blue Jays have brought my love back for the game of baseball.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's great baseball team. A lot of young players on that team.
Yeah.
The team's got a great manager. He should definitely be the American League Manager of the Year. And especially given some of the interviews he gave at the beginning of the year, talking about what his goals are. And you just have this improbable team, right? It's got a couple of veterans that are having, like George Springer having a career season, some all-star players, some superstars of the future. And you can just tell it's a group of guys who like having fun with one another.
Yeah.
Great team of people, good guy team, and I think they're going to go far. I've been predicting that they were going to win it all since July, maybe even before. But they're really good team, fun to watch.
You've also predicted the every single step of the Trump regime's attempt to take over the United States of America. And I want to ask you a question because,
Yeah.
you know, you talk about, and you being a dyed in the wool Bush admin guy, you being a true Americana guy, you come up to Canada, you fall in love with baseball again. What would happen knowing Trump's a Yankees guy? What would happen if Toronto won the World Series this year? Do you think that he'd have an issue with welcoming a Canadian team to the White House?
Well, I don't. He wouldn't invite them.
You don't think so?
No, no, of course not. And they shouldn't go.
They won't.
Everything becomes infused with politics in this moment, like, unfortunately. But, you know, the Blue Jays are an international team, like, truly.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
21 different
Vladimir
nations on
Guerrero
that team, by the way.
Jr. is
Yeah.
a legitimate Canadian citizen, right? But, you know, dual, obviously, Dominican, Canadian citizenship. His father played for the Expos. I think all the players love playing up there and get it. It's a great environment. All the players talk about how much they love playing in Toronto. The guy who had the career game that ended the season, Alejandro Kirk, of course, from Mexico.
Yeah.
Barrios is from Puerto Rico. Um, it's a team that has a lot of different passports, and I think it'd be really interesting to see the Canadian team advance, you know, with the Canadian fan base. And, you know, listen, right? Baseball doesn't want Toronto, right, in the World Series, right? Small market team, right? Everyone knows that. But I think it's just it's great to watch a team,
Yeah.
right, of people who don't let each other down, right? Baseball is a great sport in part because it's so relentless, right? It never ever stops. And so anything like that, it becomes a character test.
Mm.
And it's a team with a lot of character. So I think they're going to go far.
I do too, but it's interesting because you juxtapose the success the Jays had on the back half of the season, um, against, and you weigh it against when Trump started to bring in these tariffs and
Yeah.
started to talk about the 51st state. And you talk to some Blue Jays players, George Springer, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Davis Schneider, and they'll tell you that their season started to turn around when the entire team got up for both anthems, right? When you talk about that character test, you've got division, you've got hatred for Trump in Canada, you've got, two countries talking about the 51st state, the pushback being incredible. And, George Springer has mentioned it. Alejandro Kirk has mentioned it. Every single one of the players have talked about it. And you and I have been to several games together, done more than several games together. Um, and when you go to these games, you watch every single Blue Jay line up for both anthems. And they attribute that to the clock that we're all talking about, at one point they were 12 games behind the Yankees in the AL East. And they're like, no, let's go out there and respect people, respect where we're from, regardless of the political situation. And I find that fascinating because I wrote a piece about you. We went to a game a couple of months ago, and your reverence for the American flag while being disgusted by the American president sent me for a loop. It was in that moment I understood that there were so many people outside of what we're seeing and what we're doing that deserve our respect because they're true Americans. They're true patriots. They're people that, want Canada, the United States, Venezuela, Panama, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic to be together, to live together. But, you know, baseball has taught you some things this year about your love of the game, but it's also taught me some things about the love of humanity. And, I find that to be an interesting, sort of, set aside when it comes to the conversations that we're going to have today about Hegseth, Trump, isolation for the United States, anger, frustration, fascism, where sports seems to be this, cocoon that we all going to go into. And sports is really quietly, specifically in Toronto, having this, renaissance with fans, but it's bigger than the fact that they're winning. It's bringing a true American like yourself back to, what he loves, and you're bringing a Canadian like me standing next to you with your heart on your hand, watching the national anthem get sung. When a few months ago at hockey games we're booing the American national anthem. It truly is this beautiful microcosm of how we get better, and how we move forward in watching, baseball this year, and watching what's at stake when it comes to what we're dealing with geopolitically has been an absolute eye opener for me, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's a time where the values of the country are under tremendous contestation. And the worst of us, in a nation of 340 million people, have been given political power through a series of events, right, that we could talk about for weeks and months, that have played out over the last 20 years. But here we are. And what you're seeing right now is something that is really important, I think, for people to comprehend, which is that all fascists run promising peace and economic prosperity
Mhm.
100% of the time. And 100% of the time, what they deliver is war and economic misery. And we are journeying down that path. And what we see is a guy who said, I'm going to make the country great again, who has isolated the United States, dishonored the office of president of the United States, has humiliated the country, has weakened the country, and has caused chaos in the administration of the government that's without precedent, leading to its shutdown. And he is facing an opposition party that is led by appeasers who can't communicate, who don't understand the moment, who, if you take Hakeem Jeffries at his word, believes even now that Republicans are yearning for some reason, somehow, to do a bipartisan deal with him and Chuck Schumer. And it's all insanity. And so the American people are going to suffer tremendously from the choice that was made in 2024 before they have a chance to take the antidote to it. And that comes in 2026 at the earliest.
Mm. So let me ask you a couple questions because we've had some events, like yearly events that happen, in a 24-hour time frame. Yesterday, I watched Pete Hegseth absolutely embarrass himself in front of 800 of the most highly decorated, smartest military minds in the fucking world. Then I watched Donald Trump soft sell a coup to those people who took an oath to honor, duty, country. That's it. And I watched you put your hand on your chest in that Jays game, and I understood honor, duty, country in that moment. I understood pride in that moment. And it's not pride in what Donald Trump is doing, or Pete Nutsack, as I like to call him, is doing. It was pride in the sacrifice that your country has made for each other so you could be this beautiful, shining city on a hill, which we've talked about, dozens of times. What do you make? Because I've talked to some people about the fallout of what happened yesterday in Quantico.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you make of what I like to call, Trump's soft coup of the U.S. military? Because that really is the last line of defense, if you ask me, between, Donald Trump, the pretend dictator, and Donald Trump, the anointed dictator.
Well, every person in the room took an oath to the U.S. Constitution. And every person in that room has spent a lifetime of service um, to the nation, to the Constitution. And when you talk about the Star Spangled Banner, that song is about night of doubt. Will the Star Spangled Banner yet wave through the perilous fight? And we are in a perilous fight that tests whether the Star Spangled Banner will still
Yet wave.
wave
Yeah.
for freedom. And so I think that you have to step back and appreciate something just on the face. Is that Pete Hegseth is a buffoon and a clown and a loser. And when the room was called to attention and he walked forward, for sure, every general, every admiral is thinking, holy shit, what a fucking monkey.
That's my boss.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I sat down next to a Democratic congressman. We were at this film premiere for Bad Faith. And I sat down, I was on the last seat on the aisle. And there's another Democratic congressman next to him. And I'm not going to say who it is, but he's a funny
Oh, you
guy.
can't do
And,
that.
and no, no,
That's
no. And
cock blocking
and
me
he
with
goes,
information, dude.
and the guy goes, hey, Steve. And I was like, hey, man. And I go, how you doing? He's like, how you doing? And And he goes, well, he goes, I'm good. But he goes, he goes next to me, he goes, this guy came from nothing. He went to Harvard Law School. He's like a Rhodes Scholar. He did all sorts of shit. It's incredible. He goes, and he's got the same job as Lauren Boebert. Right. And so, um, and at any rate, all of these flag officers, right, are sitting there. And if you had an adult, right, who a Navy officer who at any point in their career had one of Pete Hegseth's many nights jumping up on a table drunk in front of all his colleagues, colleagues chanting, kill all the Muslims, right? He'd have been taken off the nuclear aircraft carrier, submarine, what have you, in a straitjacket, right? Unfit for command, right? Pete Hegseth would not be tolerated at a battalion commander level, let alone a brigade or division level. And so this guy who was lecturing the senior leadership of the military about lethality has gathered the entire force's command in one spot in one moment in time on global television, which makes no sense for, as some generals pointed out, reasons that could have explained in an email. But this is a guy who literally was sharing classified war plans on signal chats
Signal, yeah.
with journalists who within a couple of months is giving a lecture about standards. I mean, this is a guy who is festooned with Christian nationalist tattoos, whose wife trails him around in the Pentagon to keep his zipper up, his lips off the champagne, and to preside over the makeup room where the Pentagon personnel call her Yoko Ono. And he gets up there and he talks about all this bullshit. And here's the reality: the U.S. Air Force, the air wings are not able to fly because the planes are not flyable. They lack the parts, they lack the weapons, they lack the munitions. They're not good to go. The same goes for the readiness across the Marine Corps, across the Navy, across the Army. The Army does not have what it needs to fight. And these people, all of them, love Trump because Trump has made losers like them powerful people.
Relevant.
And because he has done that for them, they will do anything to anybody for him. And that's the danger.
Dude, you just summed up, a kakistocracy in less than 3 minutes. And well done. I've got some comments from generals, chief petty officers, other high-ranking officials that I put in a post today. I want to read them to you. I want to know if these sound familiar. You've kind of pointed one out.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been an email from Pete Hegseth. Press conference in camo. Loyalty test to a felon with shitty catering. Loved that one, by the way. Apparently they had sausage rolls. War Department for Culture of War, a fucking embarrassment. And this really made sense to me. It was from a high-ranking 4-star general. Soft military coup by a draft dodger and a drunk. And I think that, when we talk about the word kakistocracy, we got to add some teeth to it when it comes to the Trump regime. Is that, what people don't understand when they look at a guy like, Pete Hegseth, or people don't understand when they look at anybody else that Trump has installed in any position. Scott Bessent, Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, doesn't fucking matter. Is that he has intentionally surrounded himself with people who would suck the chrome off a fucking bumper for the guy because they were so incompetent. And that is by design. They were so compromised. And that is by design because he can work with that, because that's exactly who he is and who and what he represents. That shocked me today when I started to see some of the comments come from admirals, chief petty officers, career officials. And the other thing that shocked me today, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is that today, because Hegseth, Trump didn't get buy-in for their sales pitch to go and domestically attack the enemy within yesterday. Every general, every admiral, every single fucking person worth their salt that was in that room yesterday walked out and went, "What the fuck was that?" They've instituted lie detector tests and NDAs for every single person that was in that room and all of that support staff today, because it went so well, according to Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, that they now have to go back and double around and start doing FSB, KGB shit to keep anybody in that room from talking about how fucking
It
completely fucking inept the American institution of the military industrial complex is.
it is like Decaying Mutiny,
Mm.
the Humphrey Bogart movie where Captain Queeg is the protagonist. Pete Hegseth is a Captain Queeg character. He's utterly paranoid, deeply unfit, and now they'll polygraph all the generals and the command master chiefs and the sergeant majors to see if they're loyal or leakers, and they're destroying the integrity of these institutions, but also inherently the bonds of affection between the American people and the institutions. Um, because the military was the most trusted institution in the country,
Mhm.
and its politicization, of course, will lower the trust of the institution. And the great tragedy of the moment is about the danger, of course, that was provoked out of the ether, out of nowhere by these fools for no reason whatsoever, but also by the ego. And I wrote about this today, and I don't think that I didn't see anybody else make this point. Doesn't mean, and I've been traveling, and so it may have been like in the New York Times today, and I just missed it. But when you look at the giant American flag there and him strutting on the stage, what he was doing was reenacting the opening scene from Patton.
Mm.
Right? I don't know if he has a sexual fetish with third wife Jenny, right? That he's been planning the Patton scene. They're gonna film it, watching it. Right? Maybe have Commander Spicer, U.S. Navy Reserve, in the corner with Stephen Miller. I don't.
Watching a little cuck video. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it.
I don't know, but um, he reenacted the George C. Scott acted Patton opening scene. And those were speeches and amalgam. Patton never spoke from notes. He was always extemporaneous, but he had a speech that was very profane, that he shared, in that movie was a mellower version of. And Pete Hegseth up there blustering is quite incredible. Look,
He's a Tom
imagine
Clancy novel, dude. Like even blowing fishing boats out of the Venezuelan water. That's a fucking Tom Clancy book. Like everything that this administration and regime is, to your point, is a book or a movie. It's a performance.
totally performative, and everybody involved in sinking a Venezuelan boat, right, should have legal counsel. Is all I'd say. There's a lot of people who should have legal counsel. Like David Ellison obviously has a lot of lawyers, but I look forward to the bribery investigations. When the pendulum swings back and accountability comes. I mean, I have the deepest faith about what side prevails and wins, and that you have to look at, I think, this through the prism of the country if I had said 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, so the country's in decay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rot in the country. There would have been a lot of pushback, and it would have been very emotional.
Yeah.
And it is undeniable, undeniable, right? A country that is rotting, decaying, and Trump is the end stage of that rot. He's accelerated it. He's spread it, but no healthy democracy elects a demagogue, and then after he incites a coup, denies a legitimate election result, and literally obliterates the ability of people to know what's up and down, left and right and wrong, with the help of the tech oligarchs and the algorithms. You can't say that, oh, and then things went off the cliff.
Mm.
And so I deeply believe that the misery that is coming, and it's coming, most people are not prepared for it emotionally, financially, intellectually,
Mentally.
mentally, at any conceivable level. The misery that's coming, we can get out of it. We can stop it as a people, as a country, and the majority can stop it, and we can stop it really at any time. And that's the test ahead.
That's the character test ahead for America, but America has been introduced to a new character, right? America's been introduced to, isolationism as a character trait. America's been introduced to selfishness as a character trait. I watch this on a daily basis. You do too. Donald Trump really retreat America from its perch as the world police, the World US Aid Organization, the country, the people who have, protected Americans from some of the worst deadly diseases in the world to some of the worst skirmishes in the world by being that world police agent, by being that group of people that have the ability to say, hey, listen, we'll flash a little hardware. We're going to send a Secretary of State over there, and enough's enough. Let those people live in peace. The abatement of that responsibility has been not just unsettling, but we've seen countries like Canada fill that vacuum when it comes to the eastern flank, specifically when it comes to what Russia's trying to do with the EU. And I guess the question I would ask you, as someone who understands history in a way that you do, someone that has predicted, the isolationist regime of Donald Trump to be exactly what it is over the past several years. Is this a matter of time before a guy like Donald Trump and his regime have the ability to enact what they need to do? Or are we in a period of time? You talk about, we have the ability to stop this. I see that window getting smaller and smaller all the time, Steve. And I see it getting smaller and smaller over the time because the American people are presented with an alternative reality that does not fucking exist. From, the idea that the government was shut down today or yet last night because like Chuck Schumer wants to give violent illegal immigrants access to fucking healthcare, which has never, ever happened. It's against everything that America is. It just is not, it's not a trigger. It's not something that happens. But for some reason, people fucking believe it. I'm dealing with the 51st state stuff here from Trump's speech yesterday. He's like, I called Canada 2 weeks ago, and they're like, we want to get on the dome. And I'm like, if you do, you don't have to pay for it. Listen, I know people in the Carney orbit, as you know, and you do too. None of those things are fucking true. It's this alternative reality we're being presented. And the alternative reality of isolationism in the United States seems to be palatable, which bothers me to no end as a Canadian, to no end as a Canadian who loves his American friends, because that is not, I mean, fuck, dude, we watched it with the Second World War when Churchill's like, hey, do you guys want to help us out? And FDR's like, yeah, we'll lend lease. We'll send you some mules with some airplanes. Like, we'll see if we can, but we just don't want to be involved. But at some point in time, America has to fucking be involved, Steve.
I think that like there's a couple of things that are all true, that are hard to sort through for people, right? And I was just having this conversation with a bunch of people doing the ads and everything for the Save America movement that are involved in it, in
Mm,
just a basic strategic conversation about the moment. So Donald Trump is very unpopular, and he's growing more unpopular, but he's growing more powerful faster than he's growing unpopular.
mm,
At the end of the day, Lincoln said something that everybody should bear in mind, which is that with popular opinion, you can do anything, and without it, you can do nothing. And there's a lot of truth to that. The fundamental problem right now, right, is as you sit and you observe the situation, and you and I have talked about this, which is I feel like beating Trump is not very difficult to understand what to do.
mm,
The problem that we have right now in America regarding the confrontation we need to have with Trump and MAGA is the Democratic Party has a 25% approval level.
mm,
That's the problem, is that if you sit in the Senate and you're a Democrat, or in the House, how do you justify that? Yes, I believe this is a serious moment. And yes, I believe it's an exigent circumstance. And no, I don't think we should change our leaders. I have full confidence in them. To me, that's as batshit crazy as looking at Pete Hegseth after the generals meeting and saying, thank God Pete Hegseth's up on that wall. Right?
Yeah,
Right?
I can't see how anybody looks at Chuck Schumer, who just continues to try to sell books, or Hakeem Jeffries, and say what you want about the sombrero and the mustache and the meme and all that other shit today, and you can point to your culture war bullshit about how Trump misappropriated, racism against Mexicans with Hakeem Jeffries, who's black. I don't give a shit about that, and you've been bullish on this. But the Democratic Party deserves as much blame as Donald Trump does for the lack of action on behalf of the American people. And I cannot get over the lack of free thinking the Democratic Party has. I cannot get over the lack of institutional thinking that continues to pervade the Democratic Party. I look at Zorhan Mondami, and as much as I think a lot of the things that he stands for are pipe dreams and, socializing real estate and grocery stores and all that other stuff, he's such a break from the institution of the Democratic Party that I go, fuck, where are more guys like him as opposed to guys like Cuomo? As
Him and
opposed,
Trump beat the same people.
yes.
Him and Trump beat the same people. Right. And so the Democrats are in this moment, the negotiating position is very, very simple. And it's this. Um, I'm gonna pretend that I'm the Democratic leader.
Mm,
And I'm going to the White House. And here's what I would say. I would say I'm confused about what it is that you need from any of us. The corrupt Supreme Court has made you king. You have issued many hundreds of decrees, all illegal and nonsensical, but that's no deterrent. And you have eradicated the checks and balances. The Republican Congress will do whatever you want them to do, rubber stamp. You have the majorities. So what is it that you need? Oh, you don't have the fucking votes. You don't have the votes. Right? So I guess, right? If I were to read to you from the book of Trump, The Art of the Deal, page 17 or
Please
whatever it
don't.
is, right? That my position is I get to walk into the room now and stick my finger into your chest and tell you, fuck you.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what it says in the book of Trump. And so we'll do it the way the Qataris do it with you guys.
Yeah.
Right? Or the Emiratis or the Saudis do. Right? You want something from us, you're gonna have to buy it. Right? You wanna vote? I want the masked guys gone. You want the masked guys running wild? No fucking votes. Right?
But dude, here's the thing: is that they won't do that. And I go back to this. You and I have talked privately about
It's the
John
problem.
McCain. No, but I want to ask you a question because I
Mhm.
think this is important. The Republican Party doesn't have any more John McCains.
No.
Like leave the Democratic Party aside in their fecklessness. But John McCain, God bless the man's memory. God bless his moral turpitude. God bless his ability to stand up in front of an entire country and take his POW ridden arms and post thumbs down. That day he voted against his dear leader, who he did not buy into all the time. And I know, listen, your Mondays with Liza are like mandatory watching. Everybody, if you don't subscribe to Steve or Ryan Liza, tell us you have to. You guys talk about the Democrats, inability to do anything for the American people because they're still so institutionalized. But I push back and I look at the Republican side of this. There is no John McCain in the Republican Party. And because there is no John McCain in the Republican Party, because Mitt Romney has effectively been clipped, and because no one really gives a shit about anything on the GOP side of this equation other than keeping their black car and their stipends and their expense accounts, you have literally an army of willing assholes who will do anything that Donald Trump wants them to do. And I would question that. I would pose that to you. Where are the John McCains of this world in this party? Someone that, you ran his campaign, someone that you respect, someone that, you take an unbiased look at John McCain, and it doesn't matter who you voted for. That fucking guy's an American hero who stood up for the virtues of what America should be, who stood up to Vladimir Putin, called it a fucking gas station. Russia called it a gas station. And I would ask you that question is that what has Trump, been so effective at rooting out any kind of, you know, character from the Republican Party because we don't have any more John McCains. And that to me is a fucking travesty.
Look, if I went to Bhutan like later this evening and hiked up to the monastery,
By the way, I
right?
wouldn't doubt if you went to Bhutan later this
Right?
evening.
Like this is this is like what I'm going to contemplate, right? And I'm not trying to uh, so it's a very deeply personal question to me at one level, or I take it that way. Um because I can't separate the intellectual side of it from the personal side. And I
Hmm.
was having this conversation, and Well, I never talk about kind of conversations, with friends. I don't think I'm going to get in trouble, but I was talking to Nicole Wallace, who's a very, very dear friend of mine, and
She's great.
has been since we were kids, right? Since we were in our 20s, and we met working in California politics in the California legislature, and I grew up in New Jersey. Nicole grew up in California, and we were moderate Republicans, right? We were part of a tradition of moderate republicanism. But that tradition was the majority of the country, right?
Mm.
Ronald Reagan was elected with 49 states in 1984. It was a broad coalition. Every person that I ever worked with, ever, right? And I work closely with Liz Cheney in a campaign, right? So Liz is there. But almost every person I've ever known, on the day that Donald Trump came down the escalator, we all had the same position. Everybody was repulsed by him.
Mhm.
But 10 years later, not having moved a fucking inch from the original position and having been proven correct that what comes next is A and what comes next is B after A on a 10-year basis as we've come so far down this river, right? Why was there such moral cowardice? Why was there such capitulation? There was some level, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mhm.
That fear is a powerful motivation. This notion that in a taker society, I'm going to get mine, and there's no cause greater than self interest, really, which was the antithesis of what McCain believed in. What he talked about all the time was that the greatest part of living is to be part of a cause greater than yourself,
Mhm.
right? But the thing is, for me, because I didn't step off the line, I didn't get in line, right? And I'm not blind to the fact that I'm in an incredibly small number of people who operated at the highest level of the Republican Party and Republican politics who did not get in line with this,
Didn't bend a knee.
and
Yeah.
did not bend a knee, will not bend a knee, no matter what, right? And it's brought a lot of threats and a lot of abuse. I had to move out of my house because of the threats and the danger that was unleashed by the insanity. But what John McCain, more than anything else, he was a defiant guy, right? He was the worst of the worst prisoners in prison, right? Like, I mean, after they tortured him, beat him, they throw him in the cell and ask him if he had anything else to say, and you give him two middle fingers and say, fuck you, right? And this is a moment where you got to be defiant. And there's a lot of people that are very afraid, but you have an absolute right to speak out. It's not seditious to call Trump a fascist. It's accurate,
Mhm.
right? And so, what you realize, right, when you look back for real and what happened in World War II, most people collaborated. Right? Resistance was a small number of people, right? And in the end, I you look at some of the people that I know that have made different decisions than I've made, right? That are that are buying third homes, second homes, giant boats. Not for me.
Mm.
Um, I I think that there are some things that you can't get in line behind, and all of this stuff is one of those things.
So let me ask you a question then. I know this is your Substack Live and not mine, and
No,
I'm
no,
grilling you, but it wouldn't be us if it wasn't.
no.
Um, you look on the outside in, and you and I have shared some personal conversations. You're on the outside looking in to a party that has abandoned you. You haven't moved, as you pointed out. You're still on the line. You're still on that hardcore Republican, not Trump's Republican, but what you thought the Republican Party was. That's what drew you to it. You're now a self-avowed Democrat, but you've got issues with the Democratic Party. Obviously, everybody does. Polling lower than Donald Trump at this point is a dereliction of fucking political duty. Just want to remind everybody of that. That means that there is no one home in the Democratic Party. You talk to somebody, and you and I have been fortunate enough to been out to certain events, and people have recognized you, and they're like, "Hey, tell me about this. Tell me about." What do you tell the average American today that watched, Trump's dressing down of 800 of the most important U.S. military minds in the United States of America? Someone who understands what NSPM number 7 is, which is the directive for Donald Trump to be able to label people, no matter who you are, if you've donated to Act Blue or you've given money to Save America movement, which I want to talk about in a second. What do you tell them today? Like, what do you tell them about the party that you came from? What do you tell them about, what's in store for them? Because we keep motoring past these watermarks of dictatorial regimism. And, as I sit here today, I don't recognize the United States at all. And I'm, watched the Ryder Cup this weekend with serious consternation because my heart wanted me to continue to cheer for the United States of America because I couldn't because even the Ryder Cup had been Trumpified. But what do you tell an American today who's sitting here listening to this conversation going, Steve, how do I look at, what's coming next? Because you've not just abandoned the party, right? You as someone who was a Bush White House guy, you as someone who is a dyed in the wool, hardcore former Republican who has, by the way, called you're like you are the planeteer of republicanism right now. You've called all this years ahead of this. But what do you tell somebody who's sitting there going, I can't believe I'm watching this? Steve Schmidt is calling my president a fascist, and I'm hearing this for the first time. And by the way, if you're hearing this for the first time, you're an idiot. But what do you tell them?
Um, I think that people perceive danger in very personal ways. And you always hear the stories in California, for instance, after a big fire. Uh, there's a big fire that the people who lived were the ones who went through the barricades that said, don't go this way.
Mm.
Right. They didn't listen to the authorities. Right. So you have to use good judgment when danger grows close and it's personal. And what I've said politically is historically that the conservative party is always the vehicle that fascists use
Mm.
in a temporary alliance. And then the fascists swallow the conservatives completely.
Mm.
They devour them. They're the recessive component of the relationship. And so there is no conservative party left in America.
Yeah.
There is a radical political movement that is absolutely and utterly fascistic in character. Now, if you look at Stephen Miller's speech at the Charlie Kirk Memorial,
It was
that's a
uplifting.
Nazi speech.
Yeah, dude, it was literally ripped out of Goebbels'
Yeah.
1930 and 1933.
Right,
Horst
from
Mueller.
the Unleash the Storm, very
Yeah.
specific phraseology. So And there are no shortage of avowed Nazis or people repeating Nazi philosophy or Nazi mysticism or Nazi calling card racial science, pseudoscience that are all around MAGA and all around Trump, right? That are part of this fascist system. And so one of the things you said earlier, which I think is a completely legitimate position, which is if you talk about the people around Mark Carney and they say, well, and you have a position of responsibility around the Canadian prime minister, around the Australian prime minister, whatever. And you say, well, Trump is saying A, B, C, and D, and it's all of it's nonsensical and none of it is true. So what do? Right? Do you react to it if you're the prime minister of Canada, like you have an MSNBC show? I don't think that's the way you do it. Right? Like, so if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Right? If none of it's real and all of it's insanity, right? And so there's a diminishing aspect to all of this in the sense that more and more people are just ignoring the insanity. He's the American Nero, stark raving mad. Everybody around the world sees he's naked except the Republican Congress and the inept Democrats.
Yeah.
The inept Democrats fear him, and the corrupt Republicans worship him. And any rational person looks at him and neither fears him or worships him, but's repulsed by him and sits there and says, all this is crazy. None of it is real. Why are these people afraid of him? Why are these people worshiping him? And why can't anybody in the whole of civil society, in the most powerful nation in the world, stand up and speak in coherent fucking English about the rancidity, the rot, the indecency of all of this? And so I think what will happen is that as things get worse, we're going to have a restoration like we've always had. We've had terrible periods before. I do want to say I'm looking at some of the comments. I want to talk about GRINDR Gate with Mike Johnson. And I do you want why don't you set it up? And
Yeah.
but let me
Dude,
before you
it's
do.
funny how a viral thing can become so top of mind for people, but Mike Johnson's grinder profile, yes, go ahead. We'll get to it.
So if you work in a political campaign in the Republican Party, um, at some point in the campaign, right, someone in all the years, is going to come and say your opponent's gay. There's some type of sexual something
There's a
there.
side
But
piece.
and
Yeah.
it's almost never true, but it's almost always true when it's a far right Christian. And the great Christopher Hitchens, right, had a great quote about this, about the inevitability, right, of where these guys wind up, and he had some colorful colloquial phrase. But at any rate, at the Charlie Kirk funeral, and this is true, um, the grinder accounts exploded. The grinder accounts explode at every Republican National Committee, at every CPAC event. Matt Schlapp, the sexual predators, is a perfect example of this. And
Yeah.
so there's an accusation floating in my there's an accusation floating on the internet now
Yeah.
about
Speaker
Mike
MAGA Mike
Johnson. So
Johnson
over
having a
over to
grinder
you.
profile. Well, listen, dude, you know what? This is this has been one of the great stories that comes with all kinds of analytical data that would lean its way into there's something here because it's not just CPAC in Florida last year where they saw an 86% uptick in grinder activity. It's not just the Charlie Kirk Memorial in Arizona, Scottsdale, where they saw a 72% uptick in activity. And Grinder's cool. They're like, yeah, we'll maybe release this information if these guys keep going after, LGBTQ rights and trans people and, equalization of marriage in this country. And so, which is what I love about these gay dating apps. They're like, oh, yeah, these guys are coming after us. Wait till we tell you who's involved. Now, there was an assertion made 3 days ago by a gentleman, which you can go to deanblundell.substack.com and read about, who said he had Mike Johnson's entire Grinder profile. Now, the gentleman I actually do a Substack live with called the 5 Stack, it's every single day, 3 o'clock here, is gay. And he is also a former CBS producer who knows that Mike Johnson has a different proclivity other than, being with his wife. And so, these are rumors that have kind of curated themselves. And it's like a hockey rumor. That guy slept with that guy's wife. That's why he got traded, da 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 da. But there's so much smoke behind Mike Johnson and the Republican Party that it has spurned an entire other conversation about, how many of these gay hating, anti LGBTQ, anti trans people who are parroting Trump's bullshit are secretly super into same sex relations. And it appears after not just one, not two, but 3 different videos that this gentleman has put out, which get, completely, as he puts these videos out, each video is like, I'm even more concerned. I don't know what's going to happen. But he promised today he would release Mike Johnson's entire Grinder profile. Now, the government shut down last night at around midnight, if I'm not mistaken, and we're about 15, 16 hours into a government shutdown. So we're not going to find out what the issue is. We're not going to see Mike Johnson copped anything. But what we are seeing is the trigger for this, which is Adelita Grijalva, who is the Democrat from Arizona who won that special election, who might be the 218th signature on the discharge petition for the Jeffrey Epstein discharge petition, so we can actually see, these Epstein files. She's ready to sign off on this, but Mike Johnson's been slow playing this. So this gentleman was like, "Hey, listen, Mike, if you don't if you don't swear her in, I'm gonna put out your entire Grinder profile, screenshots, pictures, conversations, et cetera, et cetera." And, what that has done is it's lit a fire under people when it comes to the relationship that Republicans have with demeaning the LGBTQ community, with going after trans rights, which, has been a massive pillar of their, entire, hate regime, which is how can you let, 0.001% of the population compete in women's sports? It's fucking bizarre. But this gentleman has kind of upped the ante. And now 3 times he said, hey, listen, I'm going to come up with these receipts. To this point, I don't know that he has, but I've been doing this with you for an hour. And it has shaken the Republican Party to the point where, from what I understand, people in the GOP are now going around going, hey, delete your Grindr accounts. Get rid of any gay dating apps that you might have. We need to present a united front because this is such a pervasive issue in the Republican Party, because you've got a whole bunch of people in the Republican Party who serve at the pleasure of their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is antithetical to the platform of the Republican Party, who've been going after this community for a long period of time. And Mike Johnson's no stranger to that. His wife, if I'm not mistaken, has said several times she is a professional at converting gay people back to being straight. So listen, I'm not gay. I don't understand, how conversion therapy works. I can tell you that if you're born gay, according to my gay friends, you are gay. And my understanding is that Mike Johnson has some skeletons he's trying to hide. So be that as it
I
may,
mean, it's just it works the same way, right? As it does, for us, like, as a straight, it's like you like what you like, right? Like, I mean, it's innate, right? So the idea that Mike Johnson's crack pipe wife is gonna, like, attach electrodes to people, torture kids, do whatever fucking weird bullshit she's gonna do to them, right? And scar them psychologically. That's why all this conversion therapy, is torture. And all this. I'll say this about, like, Mike Johnson, like, on a serious level. Um, so all the dehumanization and all of that of people who are like you, if you are gay, which he may or may not be, depending on what we see from the release of the information, which may or may not be released, but just psychologically, right? I mean, the wow, right? It's deep, right? Like the damage, right? Like just how messed up the guy would be, right? Self-loathing to do that. Moving all of that out of the equation, the bigger issue is he's second in line to the office of president of the United States, and he's got a big secret, and, like, he's in effect being blackmailed by this guy,
Yep.
right? You do something, right, like through an official act, right, or not do it, and there's a consequence, and the consequence is your secret's going to be exposed.
Mhm.
And that is a national security danger, right? And that's why, right, from a counterintelligence perspective, they don't like anybody having secrets. And so Mike Johnson, I think we're about to find out if he's a guy, right, with a lot of secrets. And there's no small number over the last 20 years of Republican members of Congress. And I think it's important to remember that Denny Hastert was a Speaker of the House. He was a child molester.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, he
Yep.
went to prison. So, it wouldn't surprise me at all if you look at, the kind of the cast of characters of all these people. But let's keep an eye on that one.
Well, yeah, but you've hung out like you've worked with some of these guys. What is and I asked Zev this morning. He's gay. He's my podcast partner at Substack, Zev Shalev. And I said to him, what is it about the GOP? What is it? Is it, the bent and the performance they have to put on for their evangelical lobby groups? What is it? Like, why do we have the Matt Schlapps and the Mike Johnsons allegedly, and all the alleged Lindsey Grahams of the world? What is this proclivity that they're trying to hide? Because I don't understand it. Like this is the party of family. This is the James Dobson focus on the family, Jerry Falwell party. So to me, this is like it's not revisionist history, but at the same time, it is. It appears to me that there is a major repression in the GOP. It doesn't even matter if the Mike Johnson shit's true, because I've seen way too many stories about the Matt Schlapps of the world to make me question whether or not there's a major issue when it comes to not just sexual hypocrisy in the Republican Party, but the fact that they've got a whole bunch of people that are harboring some really fucking dirty, greasy, disgusting secrets about how they're treating other people while in the bedroom they're doing their own shit.
There's a lot of broken people around Donald Trump. A lot of broken people around these organizations, right? Like healthy, normal people don't try to tear down the American Republic. Don't try to tear down the democracy. Don't live in a state of constant grievance.
Yeah.
Um, it's just an astonishing and sad moment. And now, Dean, we are on the edge of Yom Kippur. The sun is almost down. It's almost the hour for me to
You got
begin
to
my
go.
atoning.
Yeah, you should. You've got a lot to atone for because you and I have walked out of the Sky Dome / Rogers Center twisted more than once. Just wanted to point that out.
Well, we've had some good times, and now it's time to atone for all the good times, all the times. um, and
By the way, Padres just beat the Cubs 3-0. That's tied at 1.
Padres have beat the Cubs. Last thing that I would say is that I just want to, if I could really quick. So I'd like to. We have 1,600 people, and I want to tell you about a guy I know. His name is Pete Corelli, and Pete Corelli was the Army Vice Chief of Staff. He's a retired four-star general, and he was one of the generals who was directly defamed by Pete Hegseth yesterday. He said, "Well, no more Millies, no more Hegseths." And if you Pete Hegseth in Iraq commanded the First Cavalry Division. That's the unit with the big patch, the yellow with the white stripe, the horse in it. They famously wear the black Stetsons, and they saw a lot of casualties in Iraq. And I was on a walk through Washington, D.C. with Pete, and we walked through Section 60 together in Arlington National Cemetery, which is the place that the killed in action from the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, are mostly buried. And as we're walking in that section of Arlington National Cemetery, uh, one of the attendants at the cemetery said, "Do you have any family buried here?" And Pete Corelli looked at the man and he said, "I do." And he said, "May I ask who?" And he said, "Well, my men
Mm,
are buried here, and my boys are buried here."
mm,
And and I don't remember the number, but he knew it, and if I recall, he remembered all their names.
mm,
And to see him defamed by a loser like Pete Hegseth, when you have a Pete Corelli telling you a story after one of the first big battles that took place in Baghdad with the First Cavalry when it arrived, and the scenes of the soldiers washing the trucks out of the blood, um, so the next batch going out wouldn't be freaked out, and what an impression that made on him
mm,
at the moment. That's who was defamed yesterday, Pete Corelli, a person who, in the aftermath of his military service, devoted himself to brain science, and to dealing with the effects of traumatic brain injury and understanding it better. And the work that he did has had a major impact. It helped a lot of people. And so when you hear people being attacked, defamed, insulted by anybody in the Trump administration, remember that person is likely to be someone who deserves and has earned your respect.
mm,
That person is likely to have done something noble that has affronted uh, ignoble people.
mm,
And when you hear about Pete Hegseth talking about the warrior ethos, know that Teddy Roosevelt was precisely correct when he talked about walk softly and carry a big stick. And this is a cabinet of fools. It is a ship of fools. And in the end, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, before this story ends, we got a lot of young American boys killed. And that's the way that always ends.
mm.
And so we have fascists in the White House. The American people are under threat by them. And the way we get rid of them is vote all these people out in an election.
Couldn't have said it better myself because I can't say it better than you can. Nobody does. Steve, thanks for having me on the warning
You
today.
got it.
Really
Good to
appreciate
see you,
it.
Dean.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do this again on my channel as well. But thank you so much for having me today,
You
pal.
got it. Take care, Dean.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.